This is Rising Phoenix Podcast. I'm your host, Michael Rhodes. This podcast is for men struggling with an unwanted divorce. I interview experts on divorce, mental health, and I provide insights gained from my own divorce journey. You are not alone. Join me. Joining me today is Mr. Michael Nolan and Mr. Greg Vorst. Gentlemen, let's just jump right into this, and why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Okay. Good morning, everybody. This is Greg Vorst here. I'm a licensed therapist, and I've been working in the healing arts for the last 20 years and in the treatment world for the last 10. I'm also a Sundo instructor, which is a form of Taoist yoga and breath work. And I've had the opportunity to support individuals that have struggled with divorce and separation through our practice at Embodied Recovery. I'm one of the co-founders with my partner Michael here. We started Embodied Recovery 7 years ago, and it's a treatment space for people that are struggling with mental health and addiction challenges.
Gotcha. Mr. Nolan, do you want to add to that?
Sure. My name is Mike Nolan. I am a certified addiction counselor. I'm in recovery myself. I got clean and sober in 2007, and then started working in treatment as a counselor in 2011. And then Greg and I met, uh, funnily enough, working together at an outpatient treatment center in 2017, and then just shared some experiences and thought, what would it be like if we started our own treatment center and implemented some of Greg's experiences with the Sundo practice and having spent time in some spiritual communities, and then for me, in my background in the 12-step communities. And so, like Greg had said, we've helped a number of people through the process of separation and divorce, and also reconnection, reunion, and mending relationships over the
Gotcha.
last 15 years.
Yeah.
Excellent. So again, the outline is just a guide. So I'm gonna deviate a little bit. Just my own curiosity. A couple questions around. Doesn't sound like you treat just men, which is fine. We're not anti-women here. But I'm just curious as the numbers in terms
Yeah.
of like what you see more of, if there is any kind of difference, and then sort of does that depending on their gender, does that change your approach in how you help them?
Oh, yeah.
That's a fair
Yes.
question.
Yeah, that's a great question. It's interesting on any given time. We might have a very different balance of men and women. And sometimes it almost seems like the stars can align in such a way to give one person or a group of people the experience that they need. I can remember not too long ago, there was a woman that came through our program that had really strong issues with men that hadn't been worked out. And she happened to be the only female with five other men,
Oh,
and it just seemed like the the opportunity was screaming for for her to find the issue, really face it head on and work through it. But there have been plenty of situations where that role has been reversed, and often it's about 50-50 or 60-40, but sometimes it can slide one direction or another.
Yeah,
gotcha.
so I wouldn't say that there's necessarily a clear delineation between men suffering with specific types of issues, whereas women suffer from a different sort of challenge. But generally speaking, it is about a 50-50 breakdown. And interestingly enough, just in the field in behavioral health and psychology and therapy, there are a lot of women. It is a predominantly
True.
female space, and
Yeah.
so it has been more rare for Greg and I as clinicians and treatment center owners to be working with people in the context that we do. So we want to have a good balance of men and women in our treatment center to be able to support those that come in, but we haven't necessarily seen a majority of one or the other.
Gotcha. Um, so one of the things I'm sure you do encounter is people sort of stuck. It's something that happens for sure during a divorce, is you kind of get in survival mode, and I'm sure there are
Mhm.
other instances, other causes of this in life. I'm sure addiction can be classified as this type of thing as well. How do you, when someone is in that survival mode, first, how do you diagnose it, for lack of a better description? How do you determine like, hey, this person's clearly in survival mode?
Hmm.
Something that I maybe want to speak to, and I certainly want to answer the question, but oftentimes, especially with addiction, when someone's coming into treatment, the whole system around them has identified them as the problem. They're the one that's drinking, they're the one that's using, they're the one that has the problem. If they were clean and
Right.
sober, then everything in life would be okay.
Right.
And we've seen it play out that way, where someone gets clean and things get worked out really nicely. But we've also seen instances where when someone gets clean and sober, it's really a disruption to the dysfunction that's been so normal for the system going into it. But just to maybe speak to how can we diagnose when someone's in survival mode? Um, I'd be curious to hear Greg's take on that. I think a lot of it has to do with the nervous system's response to stress, but
Well, by the way,
Yeah,
before you answer,
yeah,
I mean, what you're describing is also what men that, at least that I can speak to the men, I can't speak to the women, but men that have been left is very much what you described, that they're the problem.
sure.
So it's not much different. So apologies. Go ahead.
Yeah, yeah. Well, often when there's such a momentous change like that, our body can really go into shock. So a lot of the signs that we might experience might be somatic. They might be like the aches and pains. I've worked with clients, and I entered a period of this myself where I really struggled to digest food, to breathe appropriately, sleep can be really
Mm-hmm.
struggled, our energy levels and our mood. But I think one of the ways that we can really know that we're not living fully or thriving is that there's just an element of strain that really kind of is interwoven in all of our activities, and in a sense, a need to feel like I can be in control, and I can survive these circumstances, which again, I want to just say, I'm not saying that those are negative things. Someone's bad for finding themselves there. It makes a lot of sense given what somebody would experience in a divorce or some momentous loss like that. And then part of what our work really looks like is to begin, and this is where Sundo's a practice, but there are some other practices that we engage in with people where we can help them to be experiencing goodness where they are independent of the circumstances in their life. And that's an incredibly empowering situation that even if all these different areas in my life are really messed up. And that's often the case when somebody comes in struggling with an addiction, with a mental health challenge, and so forth and so on, that independent of all those areas, or even right alongside all those areas, I can begin to carve out an experience where from within I feel good.
so it's what we're trying to do is to help people see themselves as um, uh, capable of making change, of noticing the experience that they're having, even though the parking tickets are piling up and their spouse is
Right.
saying, "I'm out of here. I'm not doing this anymore." You know, their employer is upset with them for taking more time off to deal with their issues. That despite all of these things, I can just really take the time through a mindfulness practice to notice what comes up for me, what do I need, where am I storing all of this tension and frustration and upset. And so when someone goes through such an upheaval in their sense of identity, then even the smallest decisions can feel overwhelming. So
Yeah.
the sense of overwhelm is just consistently woven throughout someone's experience of life, where it's, what do you want to do for dinner tonight? Is like, I don't even know, like
Right.
whatever you want to do.
Right. Right. No, I hear you.
Yeah.
Preaching to the choir. Okay. So this is all easier said than done, right? So,
Sure.
Yeah.
that's just life in general, about some of the best practices of life. But I'm gonna hold you to push you on an answer.
Good.
How do you do that? Like, okay, and I've
Yeah.
been, by the way, I've been there. I've been there. My job was pissed. They demoted me because, I mean, it's been 6 years, so I'm good.
Yeah.
But
Mm.
I've been exactly where you described. How do
Yeah.
you find the calm in the storm. Essentially, isn't that kind of what we're talking about
Yeah,
within
yeah,
yourself?
yeah. Okay, so part of it, what we've been describing, let's say I'm really living from a place of strain and survival. There's often a mental loop that's happening in that. There are stories that I'm telling myself,
For sure.
and I'm probably ruminating about the past, feeling regretful, maybe being the target of blame for everything I did in the past and trying to sort out that and all the guilt, or I'm thinking about fears for the future. And so, how I can get to a place of goodness right now is to begin to, in a sense, not let myself be robbed by either of the thieves, the past or the future, and to join in this now and make this now something where I'm practicing coming back to myself. And the most simplest form isn't the narrative and the stories or how I'm going to fix and solve these problems, but it's actually my physical self and my nervous system. And when I can begin to practice and study that, or have a practice and a study that allows that to begin to ease up and eventually even feel good and then flourish, then I can go back and face those other things with a
Mm.
degree of more agency and power. So it's about getting out of my mind and all the stories, and even to some extent being able for a moment to at least even table some of if I'm feeling flooded by feelings, not allow myself to just be carried away with that, but do this physical practice so I can retool my nervous system.
And what
Gotcha.
we've seen as some of the most powerful venues for this type of work are generally in group settings. And so for people that struggle with addiction, 12-step communities are great. Obviously, treatment centers are a fantastic place for that. And individual therapy and counseling is wonderful, but a group space where I
Mm.
can be witnessed in the truth of my upset and
Mhm.
held in a way where I'm not being made wrong for my anger, for my upset, for my sadness, my insecurity, but just to be seen in
Yeah.
what's true for me. It does a lot to foster this emotionally corrective experience that makes it easier for me to keep taking those steps forward. And so the practice, like Greg is saying, of coming back to myself and being able to retool from a greater place of solidity is vitally important. And also to be able to do that in a group context is also something that we've seen have a huge impact.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, feeling seen and feeling heard, especially when you're going through something, makes you feel less alone.
Yeah.
It makes you feel like you have someone with you in it, which is a valuable thing, a valuable feeling.
Hmm.
I want to talk about a little bit more, hone in a little bit more about this, tuning into your body type of thing. Because I've heard
Yeah.
this, I've read The Body Keeps the Score, fantastic book, right? We
Yeah.
all know these things, right? They tell us these
Yeah.
things. These really smart people like yourselves telling me that my body, listening to my body is very important.
Yeah. Yeah.
What the fuck does that mean?
Yeah. Okay. Good. Good. Yeah. Great question.
Yeah, I
So,
mean, and I've interviewed many people, and I've had this
yeah.
discussion.
Yeah.
I kind of know what it means, but it still eludes me a
No,
little
no.
bit. It's
Y-
still I
Yeah.
get it,
Yeah.
but I don't really get it. So yeah, let's dive into that.
Okay, well,
Hmm.
let's try to give some bones and some foundation to this conversation, something more concrete. So, one window into so when I was saying coming back to the body, part of why I'm wanting to do that is because in time that's going to shape my mind. And we can see from our body a good expression of what our inner life, our emotional life, and our mental life is like. And the easiest place, we can see it in part through posture and how we're living and moving and breathing. But the big one is the breath. And so the discipline that we work with is the breath. And, it's interesting. Science is now really catching up with ancients, what they
Mm,
knew, thousands of years ago. So Sundo is a very, very ancient tradition. It's from Korea.
mm,
It's a Korean Taoist breathwork tradition. And what it teaches us to do is to work with breath in such a way that as I was saying earlier, we can retool and enhance our nervous system. And the methodology, what it starts with, the most simple and foundational one, is developing a pattern of breathing that's roughly 5 to 6 seconds. So inhaling for 5 to 6 seconds and exhaling for 5 to 6 seconds. And that's the basic foundation of a house that's going to become much more elaborate. But what we know now, scientifically, is that that's what helps us get into HRV, improving our heart rate
Oh, okay.
variability.
Gotcha. Yeah.
So syncing the nervous system and the respiratory system with what's going on with the heart. And then when we can do that gradually and slowly over time, that will shift me from a fight or flight kind of expression where my nervous system would be overstimulated perhaps, or I could be in a frozen sort of panic space.
Right.
So it shifts me from that into the relaxation response, the parasympathetic branch of the nervous system. So I can train myself to do that whether my life is going well or not well. And if I practice it consistently, then in time I'll be able to hold that experience wherever I go in life more and more and more.
Gotcha.
And then there's a whole panoply of hormones that are produced. So there's serotonin that comes from doing this, and it's a lower abdominal breath work, which is very calming and centering. So if we're stuck in our head, we're reversing where the center of our being is, because it's really lower. It's even below the navel that I'm breathing, and that's lower diaphragmatically. So I'm saying a lot of things here, but essentially this
I
allows
gotcha.
me to experience a more of a centeredness in my body, less thinking, more vitality, and a calm, focused presence. Those are the things that I can begin to develop. And then the more that I train that, that becomes my new set point.
Mm,
Well,
gotcha.
and I also want to speak to the how often we can go through life feeling almost like victimized by our bodies, right? So my ankle hurts, right?
Right.
Like that, and it's like my knee hurts, my back hurts, my neck hurts. I'm so tense, and when I engage in a practice of meditation or the Sundo practice, it can be really challenging to stay grounded in that lower abdominal breathing while not feeling upset with my body, and then letting that knee pain transition into anger about other things that are happening in my life. And so the practice isn't one where it's like, don't think about anything, just
Right.
quiet your mind.
Good luck.
Yeah, right. It does take time to just be able to notice. So when you say like, what does it mean to tune into the body? Rather than judging the experiences that I'm having in my body, I'm just wanting to try to bring a degree of curiosity to the experiences that I'm having, while using this lower abdominal breathing as an anchor for the present, as a safe home base to get back to, because it does create greater feelings of calm and relaxation and presence in a given moment. But when I start looking at all the aches and pains or circumstances or frustrations and start to give those life in my mind, it takes me so far away from the experience I'm having in the present moment that could be actually more relaxing than the one that I'm creating up in my noodle.
So I I'm a simple fella, so I'm gonna try to make this simple for me. What I think I'm hearing is it is really it's multifaceted, obviously, and most of this shit is right. It's a little complex in some ways. Also, we can tend to make things complex, but it's about attention, right? It's about
Mhm.
um,
Very
focusing on
good.
something other than all of the, as you said, your noodle, which mine's on overdrive constantly, right? It's
Sure.
so hard to like get out of it, but this is a way to
Mhm.
do that. And but
Mhm.
it's not only that, right? Because it's your signaling to your brain that once you can focus and you get your attention on your body, then there
Mhm.
are things that happen, chemicals, hormones, right, that
Mhm.
promote more peace, more
Right.
calmness, more centeredness, right? It's not just woo woo type of shit, right?
No, well, no,
There's
and it's kind of like if if I brought you to the gym and I said I want you to bench 250 pounds, and then you say, okay, I'll do my best, and you can't get the bar up,
Right.
and you're thinking this thing is going to kill me.
Right.
It would be irresponsible. And so it's like, okay, first we're just going to start with the bar, right? So let's see if we can do
Right.
10
Right.
reps of just the bar. And so
Right.
it's a gradual process. But what's great about a practice is that, like with any skill, the more I practice it, the better I get at that skill, the more sense of self-efficacy and capacity I gain in that skill,
Mm.
so that I have some evidence that suggests I'm capable, I can do it, I
Mm.
can get a little bit better. And as I continue to get a little bit better and experience more calm and relaxation, then I can almost like begin to improvise. So as maybe like a musician learns all their scales and knows how to move their hands up and down the neck of a guitar, they can improvise because they've mastered the basics. And so
Yeah.
this is something that takes time. And we've heard so many people say, "Oh, I'm not good at meditation," or
Right.
I'm just I think too much for that, or I can't sit still.
Yeah.
And so the expectation isn't that someone would be able to do some lower abdominal breathing for 5 minutes and then all of their problems be cured. But if
Right.
someone is willing to commit to a practice of, and our practice is 2 hours every day. It doesn't need to be that long, but just say 20 to 30 minutes, where they can commit to a practice of self-reflection, some of this lower abdominal breath work. They can really begin to notice a shift in how they feel in their body and how they relate to the emotional experiences that they're having day to day.
So you mentioned something there, self-reflection. Is that part of this? I mean, it sounds like it, but is that part of this process? And is that where you can work on things like identity, self-worth, self-esteem type of things? Is that it's not just breathing, right? You're also
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. So, it's very natural when somebody's going through this breath work, the deeper that they go, that more impactful feelings, memories, thoughts emerge. And then part of the discipline is to meet those while remaining anchored in my center and while self-regulating. So what I'm learning to do is increasingly face the things that I might be struggling with inward, but now with a new sense of agency and well-being. And I'm training myself to face life's challenges while in a place of thriving, because my nervous system is saying things are good. And
mm,
that's incredibly, that's a, for us to learn that, like, wow, I can face this real hardship, or I can have this difficult conversation, or I can experience this loss and be in my center and actually experience well-being while touching those places that are hard or that might hurt. uh, that's incredibly empowering. And so we train it in the morning so it generalizes throughout the
mm.
day. So we have a practice that starts each morning at 6 a.m. and it goes to 8:20. And it's just fantastic. And then you find that the day just flows. And the last piece, I had meant to say this earlier about just some practical bones for this, is when I can begin to really sink into that breathing and connect to that breathing long enough, what happens is my brainwave shift
Mm.
from a beta state to an alpha state. And so the beta state is like overthinking. That's more I'm the surviving and I'm really struggling and I see very limited possibilities.
Hmm.
And it's often there's a lot of fear that's mitigating that experience. But when I get into alpha, what I start to experience are more like flow states, creativity, and the sense of new possibilities, because it's almost like my vision before was really cramped and now I can see with a wider lens. So I might go to the same scene in life, whereas before I had, choice A, only choice A 10 times. And
Right.
now I've got a really enhanced menu. And we're training ourselves to be able to have those kinds of experiences, not just when things are good, but when we're really meeting the most challenging aspects of our life.
And when you
So
say, and just real quick, when you
yeah,
had
go
asked
for
about self-reflection,
it.
um, when someone is spending decades of their life in a relationship or in a particular job, they identify as that label, that relationship. I'm a husband, I'm a father, I'm an employer, I'm an employee, I'm a contractor. I'm the things that I do, I see
Yes.
myself as those things. And with a practice like this and this process of self-reflection, it's really trying to drill down into who what type of man do I want to be? What are my values? What do I want in my life? What's important to me? Yes, these relationships have been important, and they deserve time to grieve the loss of those relationships. And yet, I'm still someone who's deserving of connection. I'm still someone who is responsible as a father, as an employee. But those things aren't who I am. And
Right.
so this process of self-reflection helps me to distill further and further down this awareness of the truth of my being.
And you can't do any of that, right, if you're in fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, right? Like you
That's right.
can't.
Yeah.
You're not. I was telling my daughter this. I was like, it's if you're trying to print something and the printer's turned off. Like, if you're, you know what I mean? Like this,
That's right.
the prefrontal cortex is it's literally unplugged, or whatever kind of
Yeah.
description you want to use. You
Right.
can't do these types of things, right?
Yeah.
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 Uh,
That's awesome.
but it leads me to a question on this is clearly sort of a self-soothing, at least partially, right? I mean, there's
Yeah.
deeper
Yeah.
things to it, but it's learning to soothe yourself.
Hmm.
And I've been told many times of many smart people that in order to heal from something, you have to feel it. So
Hmm.
how do you bracket that, feeling it to heal it versus soothing yourself? Like, how do
Mm.
you encompass all of that? Like, do I soothe? I mean, obviously you gotta feel these emotions. Like, how do you sit with
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
for, or do you do that after you sort of get into your calmness or whatever? You know what I mean?
Well, people have been so accustomed to like fighting these feelings and
Yeah.
repressing these feelings and disallowing them and saying these feelings are bad, right?
True.
And so, in a process like this of just acknowledging that they're allowed to be here is a huge first step.
True.
Right. And so to do something like that, like I said, in the context of a community, in a safe environment, in safe relationship with a
Mm.
therapist or a provider, it's a very different experience of being with those feelings and fighting against or repressing.
Yeah.
I think
No.
something was coming up for Greg.
Oh, sure. Well, look, I would think that the soothing and being with feelings that they're not really oppositional.
Hmm.
Mm,
That as I can soothe myself and uh, be more available, and we see this in our practice space all the time. So we start with Sundo for the clients later in the day, in the morning, but that soothing and that nervous system self-regulation allows them to be present to themselves and their feelings
mm,
while anchored in something that's good. And so trying to really, in a sense, get people deep into their feelings when they have no grounding in life, that's very overwhelming. That's could be really injurious. But if I have a practice that helps me feel really grounded and centered, and it's awakening me to my experience of life generally, then I'm going to awaken to my feelings and I'm going to be more equipped to breathe through them and to work through them and to get complete on them. And from a psychotherapeutic model, we tend to hold grieving as like a very honorable, um, meaningful, necessary component to life because it's that part of the process that allows me to come to completion on something.
mm.
Uh, so I'm no longer just holding on to the resentment or if what could have, what should have, and so forth and so on. I'm really grieving and coming to terms with the loss of that thing that was a part of my life, be it good or bad.
Right.
And so we think that very valuable. And then this work really undergirds, it gives somebody a foundation into which they have a vitality and a centeredness and a presence to really attend to their emotional life.
Yeah. I mean, it's easier said than done. I'm sure.
Yeah.
Um,
It is easier said than done, and I also just maybe want to offer um, when I first started practicing Sundo, I had already been in recovery for about 10 years, and I was and I felt as though I had developed a lot of skills for emotional regulation and taking care of, the stresses of everyday life. And as I started practicing this specific practice, what I noticed was coming up for me was a lot of anger and a lot
Mm.
of control issues and a lot of frustration. And I didn't want to do this posture. I wanted to lay down, or I just wanted to sit and breathe, or and it was
Yeah.
structured in a way that really was jabbing at the parts of my personality that wanted to do it my way, that
Well,
I don't want to do it this way. And so
right.
it allowed me this opportunity to really be present with the less than attractive parts of my personality.
But how much of that is your avoidance of wanting to avoid it because it's dark, scary shit, right? I mean, no one wants to look at
Sure.
their pain. I mean, some of us do because we know it can lead to healing and all that kind of stuff. But in general, like nobody wants to sit around thinking about like, you know,
Yeah.
how I fucked up here, there, and everywhere, right? I mean,
Yeah, no, that's fair. But I guess that for me, having had that time and space in
mm,
recovery, and having been working on myself over the course of a number of years prior to it, I didn't maybe have that repulsion to these experiences
I
as
got
much
you.
as kind of noticing how strong those impulses and sensations were as they were arising. Now, it was still uncomfortable and I still didn't like it, but the value that I was getting from the practice wasn't that I feel so calm and relaxed. It was like, wow, these things have a much stronger hold on me than I thought they did. Right.
Mhm.
And so, what is this about? Can I surrender to this? Can I practice more humility? Can I just come back to where I'm at in this moment and be okay being here rather than trying to judge this or make it wrong or say I should be somewhere else or do something different or it's a waste of time or whatever it might be, right? All of the stories that were trying to convince me I should be doing something other than what I was doing,
Right.
it was a real valuable practice for me to just surrender to the moment, knowing that it was a moment for me, that what I was doing was a practice for my well-being rather than doing something someone else told me to do,
Right.
right? But that's where my mind can go, right? It's like, here, eat these vegetables, they're really good for you. And it's like, I rather than say vegetables are good for me, I say, oh, of course, you work for the vegetable company, or, like, this, you wouldn't want me to eat something else. And I can make up a whole lot of stories to discredit why you want me to do something good for me rather than try it out and see how it goes.
How much of that is like again, like an avoidance, but fear and I mean, you're
Sure.
you're you're sort of talking about like a pushback, an internal
Mhm.
pushback.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and how did you get past that? Did you just have faith in the process? What was the healing so much more appealing than the pain of looking at it? You know what I mean?
No, it's a great question, and I think that it is multifaceted. But the first and the biggest part was that I trusted the source, right? And so the source of encouragement was somebody that I trusted who had something that I wanted, and I said, if this has been able to have this type of impact in their life, I'm willing to try it despite all this resistance that's coming up in me. And I also had the space to talk through the resistance in that relationship while still engaging in the practice that I was struggling with,
Oh
right?
man, you speak to something very powerful, and that is like a model, an example, a
Mhm.
mentor, a something, a someone that you can sort of strive to be. And I think maybe I'm wrong here, but I feel like as men, sometimes we don't have the best examples of those. Like there's a vacuum there, right? And it's
Mhm.
filled by. I had an interview this morning where we talked about the manosphere, and it's filled. That vacuum gets filled by some pretty shitty people. Um,
Oh, yeah.
I- do you feel like there is that first of all, is that true? That we lack sometimes, I think, as men, like a good model and
Mhm.
or good examples or whatever. And um, where are they? Where I mean, you two gentlemen
Mhm.
are here, but where
Oh, yeah.
who are men supposed to be seeking out
Yeah.
to model themselves after?
Um, well, that's another awesome question. So for us, both, I didn't mention at the top, but I had my own recovery journey
Hmm.
as well, and it wasn't with substance use. It was more with emotional sobriety. but I was in the 12-step rooms,
Mm.
ACA and CODA. And one of the things that, even having been in the spiritual community, which is really well-meaning people, a lot of different spiritual communities, I just began to see and this is just a sort of a one way of beginning to look at like how can we find trustworthy sources, was that even in those communities and other well-meaning communities, it was like there was just still a lot of suffering and things that weren't really worked out. And for me, that was true too, as somebody who was a spiritual aspirant. And it wasn't until I really got into recovery and came to terms with a lot of my brokenness and began to really take ownership for it and look into those dark places that you mentioned that are so fearful. So it's not to say that everywhere you go in the rooms, there's going to be an excellent
Right.
person, because that's not the case there too.
Yeah.
But like if you're really looking for that person who has that integrity, who's done that inner work, and then you can see because they're living it out. So
Mm.
our center is called Embodied Recovery. And the reason why we took that name is we wanted, to the best of our ability, to really live those values, to embody them, to live them out in our day-to-day living. And when you see that, and somebody's gone through a recovery process, I can have trust in that because it's not something that they're doing from a place of control. It's not something that they're doing from their own little egoic place. They've really invited a higher power or something um, more powerful into their life to give them guidance. So they're being mentored,
Right.
in fact. And so they've gone through a process of surrender, and I can have a lot of trust about the source back of them, even yet still.
Yeah. True.
Yeah.
I just feel like that unless you are in like a recovery space, I feel like in general, like it's hard
Hmm.
to find for men.
Yeah.
Sadly.
Sure. Yeah, and it's yeah, it is difficult to find that. And Um, it's interesting in thinking about your sharing. We didn't always have the greatest examples. Greg and I both had very high performing fathers.
Mm.
And my dad has been a football coach my whole life, and so
Mm.
I saw him, coaching these elite athletes at the highest level. And one of the things that I saw him do really well was maintain a degree of humility despite his elevated position, and acknowledging that, if I'm the smartest person in the room, then the whole room is in trouble. And so as I was struggling and entering into Alcoholics Anonymous, and they're saying, you need to believe in a higher power, and you need to come to these meetings, and you need to
Right,
get a
right, right.
sponsor, and you need to work these steps. I'm thinking, um, I don't need all of this. I don't belong here. But until I got to the place where I recognized I did need the help, um, in that moment, I was able to start looking for, like I said, people that had what I wanted. And the sponsor that I chose was someone that I chose because every meeting I went to, he was there in the same seat, 10 minutes before the meeting started. And I knew that I had a capacity to destroy my life so magnificently that if things went really wrong, I knew that if I showed up here, he would be in that seat. And so what I needed at that time was just someone that was consistently showing up.
Yeah.
And I'm so grateful that I chose him to be my sponsor, because what he led me through was a real process of self-discovery. But he was just one of a series of mentors, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
both Greg and I needed to find mentors that were able to hold us accountable and challenge us in the
Yeah.
ways
Yeah.
that we needed to be
God.
challenged for where we
Again,
were at that time.
Yeah.
easier said than done, right? Because as
Yeah.
a guy who has a friend that he's exhibiting behaviors that I wanna I need to hold his feet to the fire, but
Mm.
God, that's a really hard fucking thing to do. You know what I mean? To be
Yeah.
like, hey,
Yeah.
dude, you're kind of fucking up a lot. You know what I mean? It's a scary thing for me to do, right?
Yeah.
But I
Yeah.
know that he needs that, and it's a conversation I have to have. And God, it's not fucking easy.
Well, it's not, because we're all wired to imagine that my concern for you means that I'm telling you you're bad.
Yes.
when it's not that, right?
Right. Right.
When I voice my concern, it's because I care about you.
Yeah.
I'm worried about you, and so I would be a bad friend if I
Yes.
didn't bring it to your
Yeah, yeah.
attention,
Yeah, what for me that's the scare of the backlash. Like, what is he
right?
gonna
Mhm.
say? Well, fuck you. What the
Sure.
fuck you know? I
Yeah,
don't need you. Click, right?
Yeah.
yeah.
And so it's that fear, that unknown, that the story isn't told, and I'm filling it in such a negative way. Do you
Hmm.
think that when you go through your process and you kind of learn to center and
Mhm.
soothe, that some of those types of scenarios maybe they don't disappear, but you're able to come from a place where
Yeah.
not everything is a catastrophe because you have some kind of
Yeah,
center.
yeah. Yeah, there was a question that you had too about the roles, and I think it fits into um, somewhat into that lens where when we do this work more and we develop our center, we become less dependent on whether someone likes us or doesn't like us,
Mm,
or whether we get the response that we wanted or the one that we fear. There's a great saying, and it's in the Upanishads, praise or blame, it's all the same, which it says it really suggests a kind of centeredness that I'm not living through conditionality.
mm.
So it's not that now people just when we notice them, they say, "Oh wow, thank you."
Yeah, right.
I was
Right.
waiting for somebody to tell me that. They
Right.
still might meet it with the same sense of upset and hurt,
Yeah.
and that might actually be a really good thing, even though they're really ticked off and they might need to shut down for a minute. But I don't take it personally in the way that I once did, and my own sense of well-being
Mhm.
isn't contingent upon them liking me or not liking me.
So I'm gonna have to ask this question because I'm a
Yeah,
man and
yeah.
I'd like to know, how long does this take? If I start tomorrow, when am I gonna be like you? Like, how long does it take? How many days, how many hours a day?
Well,
Like, what am
yeah,
I
yeah.
doing? Give me the
That's awesome. So look, I just want to say too, in making a statement like that, it's not all or nothing. So
sure.
even somebody who's in recovery for codependence, I can see where I was wildly codependent and my life has experienced so much emotional freedom. And there are times where I can experience those old parts of myself. But the general trend has been one of greater emotional freedom and emotional
Mm.
sobriety. And that continues to grow as I do the work. So it's not like you go through this 21-day course and then
Right.
you're never bothered by
Right.
Yeah.
anybody.
Hmm.
There's
Damn
always an
it.
element of
Yeah.
work. But to speak to what you're saying, like the way that it's described psychotherapeutically, from somebody who, let's say, who's first getting into the rooms with addiction, that might be 1 to 3 years just to
Mm.
learn how to be sober. And then 3 to 7 years, um, post that, let's say another 4 years total, it might take to learn to be more emotionally sober. But the thing is that every step along the way, I'm feeling improvement. I'm feeling a sense of like, even when I'm struggling, my relationship to that struggle is improving and I'm having new insight and new capacity. So it's not like I have to wait for 4 years to get it. I'm getting it all along the way. But these things, there are deep psychological processes undergirding all of this, and they're not meant to change overnight.
Oh
They're meant
no.
to change gradually,
No.
but it's a lifelong commitment. But I would say you'd start to really experience some improvement if you put a couple years into a practice like this and then did some work around codependence, you'd be a totally different person.
Yeah,
It's
I could
it's
imagine.
unbelievable.
Yeah. What do you do when you have people that experience some growth but then setbacks, like something, like they feel like they're doing well and then something happens and they don't handle it
Yeah,
so well and they feel like,
yeah.
yeah, I see it all the time in the guys that I work with, like they're like, oh, I'm right back to the beginning, I've made no progress. How do
Uh,
you handle those types of things?
Yeah. Well, sometimes that can be like a mental filter where somebody views things from a pessimistic light. So it
True.
might be helpful to just anchor
Hmm.
them in some of the things that obviously have changed. Um,
Well, and people can have very different reactions to those types of setbacks. And with something like addiction, it can be uh, I guess maybe in a helpful way, black and white. They used or they didn't use, right?
Right.
And so there are certainly people that will relapse and say, "Oh, it's just a slip. It's not that big a deal."
Right.
Like I still know what to do and things are
Uh-huh.
going well, and they want to just blow past the issue.
Right.
And then there's some people that will catastrophize and say like, "Oh
Right.
my God, I'm right back to the beginning, and nothing's ever going to go right again."
Well, and that one's slippery too, because now that gives me permission to not be accountable to the work. It's
Right.
like, hey, nothing ever changes for me. I'm just obviously defective, so
Right.
I'm going to continue taking the weak path. And but look, if I am making mistake, that's okay. Now my
Sure.
insight's growing. I'm watching myself. And what we tend to do with people like that, ourselves included, is to help them feel the mistake, meaning be in touch with the consequences of it. Notice it. Don't just, because you can really dismiss it by saying, like, well, I'm just defective, or this always happens to me, and so forth and so on. So keep being with it, and eventually that awareness of me witnessing myself doing something that's injurious to myself or unhelpful to myself, eventually that will provoke the change. So
Gotcha.
I just have to stay with my process, and it requires
Trust the
patience and
process.
humility.
And also a willingness to be held accountable
Yeah.
and radical honesty.
Yeah,
I need to be willing
that.
to be held accountable and be honest about
Yeah,
what it is that I'm doing and how I'm living. Because if I'm dishonest, I'm
yeah,
trying to negate the consequences that I don't want to face and
yeah.
pretend like they don't exist. And when I'm honest, then the consequences I experience are natural. They make sense
Yeah.
that I would experience the consequences of the
It's not,
choices
it's
that
not
I'm
life
making.
being so unfair.
Right.
How I want to get into identity, but I want to touch on this
Yeah,
piece a little bit. Like,
yeah.
is that one of the more difficult parts? Is people to be honest with themselves?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Right.
Usually,
Yeah.
oftentimes people need like a team of people to call bullshit,
Yeah.
Now in a loving way, not
Right.
like,
Right. Yeah.
hey, it has to be done like firm but loving, but people are also self-deceived. So it's not always the case that it's a conscious effort to be deceptive, but we may have been habituated in such a way where lying has been a great defense and a necessary one, depending on what our early emotional upbringing was. And we may have just done it so much that being honest is going to be a really radical confrontation. But
Yeah.
that's where healing really, the healing journey really can begin.
Um, yeah, I want to shift to identity a little bit. 'Cause I was trying to think, you know, the identity of an addict and the identity of a divorced man. I gotta think there's
Uh,
some similarities there because there's probably an overarching feeling of failure. I'm a
yeah,
failure,
yeah, yeah.
period. Right. And
Mhm.
so, how do you start to change that mindset?
Mm.
In other words, okay, you're healing, you're feeling a little bit better about life, but you have these moments and they remind you of this identity of a failure. How do you shake
Mhm.
that
Mhm.
in totality, or at least mostly?
Yeah. So something that was coming up for me in this was just thinking about the nature of a marriage and a relationship, and the way that it's different from addiction is just that in my addiction, I get to call upon my drug of choice anytime I want it, and it's reliable and produces the results I'm looking for each time, more or less.
Right.
Um, and in a marriage, it's a relationship between two people that have in theory come together from a place of mutual respect and care and love and honesty and transparency. Now that's a big assumption
Yeah.
that relationships come together in those ways. Um, but I can just maybe in speaking for the identity that I carried in my addiction was that I'm not good at anything other than this. This
Yeah.
is the only thing that I'm good at. And in a lot of marriages, a husband and a father sees themselves as I'm the provider, I'm the caretaker, I'm the problem fixer, I'm the the doer, and yet their connection to their sense of self in relationship is very much dependent on the reactions of the other people in their household. Do they
Right.
approve? Are they happy with this? Am I giving them what they want? And if I'm providing for their basic necessities, I can just give myself permission to not tend to any of the other emotional issues in the relationship. Well, I've
Right.
provided enough, and so they should just
Right.
be happy.
Right.
And so there's a real vulnerability required in maintaining a healthy relationship long term that a lot of men can um, tune out from. And so this isn't an accusation as much as just a real call for men to bring some more attention to um, that if they want to be the best father, they need to be the best husband. And if they want to be the best husband, they need to be the best version of themselves.
Yeah.
So they need to really take care of themselves in a way that is worthy of the love and respect and care that they want in the relationship.
Yeah. It just I see so much of the opposite of that in some ways. There's unfortunately, I think there's a lot of victimhood, victimization, and there's some
Mm,
truths to some of that. Victims exist, obviously, but I feel like there's a bit too much of a finger pointing,
mm-hmm,
uh,
mm-hmm,
non-reflection, especially
mm-hmm,
amongst men, because I think it speaks to the inability of men to not process emotions, to not be able to
mm-hmm,
sit with negative emotions. And so
mm-hmm,
therefore they don't want to deal with yours either. Like they can't even handle their own. Uh,
Sure.
they sure
mm-hmm,
as shit don't want to handle someone else's. So I think maybe that's what this your practice provides, your process provides is the ability, the safety, the internal safety to be able
mm-hmm.
to handle these emotions. Would you say that's one of the bigger benefits?
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah.
And I'll also say that the process of separation and divorce and custody agreements
Mhm.
doesn't foster an environment
Yeah.
where
No.
people are willing to take a lot of accountability, right?
Yeah,
No,
yeah.
So
sure as
there's
shit
just
doesn't.
a ton of mudslinging and finger pointing in those
Uh,
processes.
and
Yeah.
I just wanted to, there's maybe like a meta level conversation around whether it be addiction or divorce or my mental health challenge, my depression and my anxiety, that we have a teaching model. We do an empowered living teaching series, but the first teaching is based on the farmer and the cow, which is an ancient uh, teaching from the East. But in that, we have these stages of development, and the first one is denial. And in that, it's like whatever the disease that I'm suffering through, and that could be the loss of a relationship in my family, or these other tragedies with addiction and mental health, or something physiologically. In many cases, part of my posture towards life is that life lovingly is giving me messages all the time. Life is constantly giving me messages, but I'm in denial. I'm not receiving them. And so the way that life works to really get my attention is to increasingly up the ante.
Hmm.
And so whatever the challenge or the struggle is that I'm facing, it's often the case that much earlier to where I am now presently, I have been denying, ignoring signs and issues that needed to be addressed.
And so, if you think about it in the context of say, a marriage where, say, a wife cheats on her husband, and a husband looks at that as an ultimate betrayal, and the wife isn't willing to take accountability for that betrayal, it from the outside looks reasonable that the man would judge the wife for her choices, and yet this is also the woman that he chose to marry,
Right.
right?
Oh
And
yeah. They
and
they
and
forget
so
that one sometimes.
that's
you
right.
you picked her, man. So yeah, yeah.
That's right.
Well, and it also might be somebody that they've been emotionally unavailable to for the last decade.
That's I think a large part of the problem.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, it was for me, if I'm being honest.
Mm.
Yeah, there was a question that you had started with at the top that I don't think we answered about how we treat men and women differently,
Hmm.
and really we meet everybody with the same spirit, but there is a kind of conditioning that it's not across the board, but
Right.
more often than not, men tend to have a deadness to their emotion or a difficulty connecting with and allowing themselves to feel it. So they may have been numb from it. And then women, conversely, sometimes we might hear I'm in touch with my feelings, but they might actually be flooded by feelings. And
Hmm.
actually, both parties exhibit both traits. So men, when they get in touch with their feelings, they tend to swing really widely into a flooded state. And so we're really working with both parties to try to help them to be in touch with feeling with a degree of spaciousness. So I'm not overwhelmed by it, but I'm also not shut off by it,
Right.
shut down or numb to it. So I want to be in touch with it because there's a source of wisdom there,
Yeah.
but I need to have enough centeredness and enough of a feeling of anchoring to be able to use the wisdom of those feelings constructively to get the messages. And typically there's a split. That's the way that I named it, but that's not always the case. We've worked with women that can't that struggle to identify their feelings much in the same way with men, and we've worked with men that are really labile and have feelings all over the place. And so, those are kind of stereotypical. There's a
Yeah.
general experience of that, but it's not always doesn't always cut out that way.
Yeah. Gentlemen, thank you so much for doing this. What's the best way for people to find you, get in touch with you, learn more about what you're doing?
Yeah, so if people are struggling with addiction or mental health issues, they can certainly find us at embodiedrecovery.com or call us directly at 888-372-3610. If they're interested in the practice or if they want to come to some of our talks, those are hosted by our nonprofit organization called Melos, and so they can go to meloscenter.org. So it's M as in Mary, ELOS center.org, and that'll have more information about donations that they can make to the nonprofit, join us for our Sundo practice, attend our workshops and dance events, and so we're
Yeah.
accessible.
And in that, there's the monthly talk that Mike and I do at the end of the final Wednesday of each month, and that's from our Empowered Living teaching series. All that's available online via meloscenter.org.
Gotcha. Well, thank you again. The last question I ask everyone is, what words of wisdom would you impart to a man just beginning his divorce journey?
Mm. Mhm.
I would suggest that they find a mentor, that they find another man who has gone through the process of divorce and is living out a quality of life that they hope to have in their own life, and then be willing to take direction and be held accountable by that man or a group of men. And there's certainly a ton of support groups out there, but specifically, obviously tune into the Rising Phoenix podcast, but to really tap into a group of men.
Yeah, I'm right there with Michael. I think that to suffer something like that alone and without the support, without being witnessed and having a space that can appreciate your experience, I think that adding insult to injury, like it just there's so much value in that. So getting with a group of men sounds first and foremost to me.
Yeah, agreed. Well, gentlemen, thank you again so much for doing this. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
Thank you so much for watching and or listening. If you are feeling alone on this journey, please join our Discord server. Becoming a Phoenix is not a solitary act. It is one achieved through community. Our Discord server is just that, a community of men fighting to survive, thrive, and rise from their divorce. Go to risingphoenixpodcast.com/Discord for information on how to join and what is contained in our Discord server. Please join us.